If you aren't communicating through stories, then you aren't communicating. I'm unsure who said this, but it stuck when I read it. It brought me back to once upon a time when we sat around fires under a starlit sky, enthralled by tales that had our hearts racing, laughter ringing out, or tears flowing, the flames mesmerizing us and the words being etched into our souls. Have we lost the art, or just forgotten how valuable storytelling is? I am Nuala.
And I am Karin. And we are the Safety Collaborators.
Our mission is to help people have better conversations and change the way they think about safety. Consider us your thinking partners, sharing expertise and wisdom in everything safety, safety culture, and psychological safety.
So storytelling has allowed people to make sense of the world and derive deeper meaning from their lives since the beginning of human history. This is how we learnt values and morals and stayed safe and dreamt of a better future. I come from Australia, where the Aboriginal community are wonderful storytellers. They sit around even to this day. They have talking sticks. They allow us to have great conversations, and we have adopted some of their talking stick philosophy when we have conversations and in meetings, and just to help the storytelling process.
That and helping us learn and explain things that didn't make sense and keeping people safe.
You come from South Africa, which is full of amazing tribes of storytellers.
I remember when I was working on a diamond mine in South Africa, and it was incredibly hard kimberlite. And they'd closed the mine in the early 1900s because they were doing so much damage trying to get the diamonds out. But they'd left all these fissures that snakes bred in. And then when it rained, the water would fill up and all these snakes would come pouring out. And the fables and the stories around that to terrify children to not go into that pit was amazing. But it wasn't based on facts, it was all based on fiction. But it was their understanding that there was a danger. And how do we keep people safe? And when I heard those stories when I was working there, I was like, we do these things and we share these to help each other grow, to become better human beings. And the verbal way of sharing stories was long before the thought of writing or communicating even came into being.
That just took me back to childhood. My family is German, so of course I grew up on the Hansel and Gretel stories. And let me tell you, they're actually terrifying. They weren't actually nice stories. And as you just said a minute ago, they were to either teach us a lesson or to stop us from doing something. They've sort of turned into, thanks to Disney, I think, and Disney Plus, into nicer stories today. But their origins were not. Even the Three Little Pigs and the Wolf will blow your house down, you know.
Well, exactly. Ring-a-ring-a-rosie's a pocket full of posies.
Yeah. So there's lots of these stories. There are lessons in all of them. And I think the reason we're talking about this today is we were at a Safety Expo a couple of weeks ago, which was great fun. And one of the presenters, who is very, very good at teaching people on how to do storytelling, had a great presentation. And underlying it all, it was actually about the introduction of a tagging system. In reality, the whole story was wonderful. Didn't really mention tags very much at all. But he used the art of storytelling and persuasion to get buy-in. What he shared with us was how you can just tell or you can tell a story, and what a difference that makes.
And what the difference and the difference to the outcome, because when we get buy-in and people have an emotional connection and that they feel a part of it and they can understand what's in it for me, then implementing a new process or way of doing things or trying out something different makes sense. When I'm telling you, Karin, you will do this because I've told you you need to do it, you will be implementing it as of today, and there will be a disciplinary if you don't. All that does is get my back up and I just go into defense and up yours. I'll do whatever I want because there's nothing in it for me.
And I think the other really important missing piece in that is the why. So part of the persuasion, and this is why it's such an important leadership skill, is if you want to make a difference, if you want to, and corporate skill actually, in how to make a difference, to make that change. We've all heard horror stories of change implementation. And they're generally terrible because they haven't been given the story behind the reason for the change, whether it's a new tagging system or it's a complete integration of something else.
And when we think about, why do we use stories in this? So in episode 45 and 6, those were both actually based on fictional stories. It was based on a movie that just inspired the conversation. So we can learn from other stories. And in the presentation around storytelling, it's not always, you might not have the example in your industry, so maybe you need to pull in stories from other areas and the news or wherever it is to be able to sell your need or your story as to why this makes sense. But the person telling the story, it's about building connection, where it's becoming about us, not me versus you in this. And it's about being shown as personable. That, I am a real human being. It doesn't, regardless of title, regardless of position, whatever the case is. I am a human being just like the rest of you that I work with. And when I can even share a story that is about maybe a lesson I've learned about something I did or didn't do so well, and I can give a little bit of vulnerability to show that, what? We all make mistakes. We don't always get it right, but how we deal with it is important. And this is my experience. What that does is it gives our team permission to share. Sometimes we do need to give instructions. We're not saying that you see someone about to hurt themselves that you're going to go, oh, let me tell you a story. You're going to go, stop the job.
Absolutely. And please remember that. There's a time and a place. And it makes me think of what we often talk about, the 3 levels of conversation matrix. When does it need to be transactional? When does it need to be positional? And when does it need to be transformational? Many people hear that word transformational, think, oh, could be a bit wooey or whatever. But transformational means that you might need to be persuasive. You might need to tell that story to help bring everybody on the journey.
And, at the beginning I asked that question, have we lost the art of storytelling? Have we forgotten about it? And I don't think it comes naturally for everybody.
No, I sense that as our communities have become, particularly depending on which worldview you have, but if you're coming from a worldview where it's about, I must achieve, I must do this, I must do that, that's wrong, that's right, then the storytelling takes a back seat because it's become more individualistic. Whereas I think storytelling is about sharing. It's about taking everyone in that community, whether it's a team, a group, an organisation, or you're pitching to Dragon's Den. You're taking people on a journey and you want to influence what the situation is in front of you. So back in 2018, I had the scary, momentous moment of doing a TED Talk. Now, no one just gets up on a TED Talk, on a TED stage from scratch. Right. You might be able to wing it over Zoom or something, a presentation.
But there's a line.
But there's a line, So, in fact, I had a coach that helped me on that journey to help me be able to tell a story that would resonate with the audience. And took me through a bit of a design process as well. So the first bit is, now I'm talking about a story where you really need to spend some time thinking about what is it that you want to achieve. And this is where storytelling in business and in presentation and in leadership becomes important. So it's not just about storytelling for the sake of it at times. So here, you really have to think about, well, what is it that I need to say to get people to pay attention? What's the opening line I might need? Now, the title to my TED Talk ended up being, what do you do when your life turns to shit and you have just 64 Australian dollars, so that was a while ago, so it wasn't much, to your name? You need to have a conversation. In fact, you need to have many conversations, believe me. So it was based on a true life moment, and at the heart of it was about conversations. It was that the whole talk was about conversations. But from there, I started to talk about trips to Antarctica and penguins and icebergs. So I used beautiful imagery to take them on a journey. And so it started with, okay, this is where I kind of ended up, but I had a lot of conversations before I could get there. So I had to take them on the journey. And the benefit to the audience was that conversations can help you get out of difficult situations, as well as also you think about the conversations I had to have with the banks, because I was not in the, if you can imagine, I only had $64 to my name, financial position wasn't great. And I remember at the end of the talk, a couple of people came up to me and they went, "That was fantastic." And it made me realise that, okay, I might be in a bit of dire situation right now, but there is light at an end of that tunnel. So it was really about being vulnerable. It was being credible in my vulnerability. It was a real experience. And you might be asking them at the end of that story for support, or there is something in it for them to do, or you might be wrapping it up in some way. So every story is a little different. And the idea is to get that buy-in for the most cases, particularly if we're using it in the business sense. Now, we're sitting around a dining room table and sharing stories. Well, why are we doing it then? It's because we want to entertain. We want to maybe get laughter, maybe sadness, So there's many reasons why we might tell a story. So designing a TED Talk took quite some time to be able to tell that story to an audience that I wasn't really 100% sure who they would be, because it could be anybody, right? And make it in such a way that it was compelling. And I was the lead speaker of the night, so it had to be pretty interesting to kick off with.
Oh my word.
And for all of you who want to go and find my TED Talk, sadly it doesn't exist. The sound technicians on the day messed it up and they tried everything to fix it, so all 6 of the TED Talks never came to life. But I am going to re-record it just for our website to share some of the imagery and tell the story. Watch that space.
Fabulous, because it was amazing. And I love being on the journey with you from the back end. I wasn't there physically in person, but through your learning and you sharing your story of how you were learning and what was going on, I learned some tips and techniques and key things. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. The black screen.
The black screen,
yes.
When you want to have your audience attention focused on you, have the slide as a black screen. Yeah. Fabulous. Also that, have the emotional catch in the beginning. Don't start with the build-up. And, I think one of the examples was, start with the packet broke and 24 eggs broke on the sidewalk. Don't start with, I was grocery shopping and.
Indeed.
Start with the moment of impact and go, this was the tragedy, or this was the laughter moment, whatever it was, and then build the story around it. What are some of the tools that we can use to help people actually tell better stories? I mean, I think of some of the cubes that we had at the expos we've been at recently, or cards with a statement on it, and then where do you take it from there?
The conversation cubes.
Share some of those, because you found amazing ones.
So storytelling cubes, the conversation cubes, the choices cards. There are lots of tools that can help people open up and start to just speak. But, you can you imagine starting a meeting with, "Once upon a time"?
Well, talk about getting people out of their comfort zone and shifting the energy in the room. I think that's a brilliant idea.
It is. I mean, I had a whole framework. So if you think about some of the key things that I learnt during that process, there was a framework. Don't have it all written out. In fact, I had a board. I didn't even have a screen in front of me. I just had like a cardboard with sticky notes and big texters and imagery. Now, everybody can do their own thing, but it was in a corner. It was just enough for me to remember the key points and the prompts. Now, up to that point, I had it scripted word for word. But on the day, there wasn't a script in sight.
When I was doing public speaking, training, it was the best impromptu public speech is exceptionally well prepared. It's around always having something kind of in the background that you've got some kind of frame to work with. Yeah. So, know that you want to start with an emotional connection.
Indeed.
You can bring people's emotion out, that they want to be a part of solving the problem.
I think what's important in that is, always be aware of what's in it for the audience, what's in it for them. Yeah, you might want to share your story, but what's its purpose and what's the benefit to the people or the group that you're talking to? What is it you want them to do? I mean, I think some of the other tips and tricks in terms of the TED Talk is more about presentation tools, presenting things. Nuala mentioned the black screen. I think there's a fear sometimes when we have PowerPoint slides that everything has to be on one slide. No, it doesn't, because nobody knows.
Oh, dear Lord, no, please.
Nobody knows that you've slipped from one to the next. You're better off having one line on one slide and go to the next and have the next line, and don't use animations. It's so 90s. Let's lose it.
And you can hear the emotion coming out around this, because we've recently been suffocated with some
hectic slides.
Not so fantastic presentations. And,
No.
Maybe that's another whole business line.
Yeah.
How to present to engage your audience.
Yes. And if you can't read it, trust me, your audience can't read it. So don't stand there and say, I know you can't read it. Well, then don't put it there.
If you want to reach out to us, use the hashtag Conversations That Matter and we'll pick it up on the socials. Or look out for us on LinkedIn, Karin Ovari, me, Nuala Gage, or our company, Safety Collaborations. Now back to this week's show.
Storytelling does take a bit of practice to get used to it.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest piece of advice I ever had was speak from the heart about something that you care about because you want other people to actually benefit and to grow from. So it might be, like if we think about when do we share a story versus giving an instruction. The example you gave at the beginning was you might be introducing a change. So it might be a change to a process or a system. Well, why are we implementing this? Is it because someone in head office decided it was a good idea and we're now going to just force this down on people? Or has there been an incident on another site or in a community where you're going, oh, wow, they had a tragedy over there. It's something that could be a potential reality in our world. How do we make this better? Share that potential or that tragedy and say, this is what's happened elsewhere. How do we keep ourselves safe? And this is kind of what we've come up with, and this is the why behind it. It could be you're about to do an operation that involves, some quite dangerous activities or tasks. And part of the toolbox talk, instead of saying, right, this is what we're going to be doing, this is what we're all responsible for, share a story and say, or ask the question, has anybody ever done this task before where things have gone wrong? Would you like to share it, and how do we learn from this as a team so that we are turning our minds onto focus and direction as to what we're doing, not just going with the flow and just going into it. Anything else that you can think of? I could see your mind ticking over there.
I think you're right. Too often we get people in groups that are just told, this is what you've got to do and do it in this way. And by asking other people to share their experience, when I was listening to you, what I was realising is that maybe we need to shift people's focus from thinking it's an instruction or it's a this or it's a that, but rather how do we turn this into that sort of conversation that's a story that helps us remember things. Because I think stories help us to remember more than instructions do.
Very much.
They absolutely help us to remember things.
Because it has that emotional connection.
You said something earlier, is it always easy to share your story? No. Sometimes that story could be uncomfortable, it stirs up old emotions, it could be triggering some trauma responses. So be mindful of that. When you ask people to share stories, make sure it's a safe space for them to do that. And don't just suddenly stay out of the blue. Come on, share stories about your experience when it's gone wrong. That might be a bit frightening for people if it's never happened before. So, you introduce it. If you're the leader or the team leader, start by sharing your own story. So coming back to something we said earlier, it helps to give permission. Your vulnerability opens up that door, if you like, for safe space and permission to move forward.
And there is we've mentioned it a few times, there's a really good process of how do you encourage people to speak. So you presented it in such a memorable way the other day, the 1, 2, 4. So say, this is what we're going to be doing, this is the task today. I want to give you a couple of minutes to think about, on your own, when you have done this kind of task before. When have you had seen something go wrong, heard about when this hasn't worked out well, or where it's worked really well? Then get the person to turn to the person next to them. So then you're going from 1 to 2, and say, speak to the person next to you and share your story with that one person. And depending on the size of the group, you can then go from the 2 to the 4, which is, okay, so now you've been in pairs, go into groups of 4. You know, maybe depending on your level of comfort of your team, let's say you're doing a toolbox talk, there's 12 of you, you know, you might go from the 1 to the 2 to volunteering who would like to, in the bigger group, you know, share 1 or 2 stories, because you generally won't have time for everyone. But that's a great way of getting people to be comfortable, because I've now checked in. I've turned to Karin and I've said, Karin, this is my story. And you've gone, oh, wow, gosh, there's such learning in that. Or I think other people need to hear that. You get that validation. Then I'm more comfortable to share it in front of the rest of the group. And it's around helping everyone have better conversations. And through having these better conversations, it is changing the way that you and your teams think about safety, because it's really giving that solid why as to, here is why we're doing this. It's not just a whim. It's not a great idea. It is about you, because we care about you and we care about getting this done the best way possible.
Absolutely. And there is no better way to do that. So we should go into some good ideas, some do's, if you like, about business storytelling. We're dropping the word don'ts. We don't like the word much. The do's.
Exactly, because if we focus on the good, it grows more good.
Exactly. It gives you oxytocin instead of cortisol.
Yeah.
So, you know, think about, be inspiring. Don't just tell a story conveying facts, although it may be part of the story's journey, but certainly think about how you can connect emotionally to your audience or to the person in front of you or beside you.
And be clear about the message that you want to portray. Try and bring it down, keep it in a nutshell.
You just made me think about something. Be aware that people tell their stories differently. So some people might be a little bit short and, you know, get to the point quite quickly. Other people tend to take meandering journeys.
Yes. And be animated.
And they might meander. So don't cut people off, I think, is the thing sometimes. I just said a don't. But anyway, it's more about being aware that we all have a different style. So your style might be X, but somebody else's will be Y, and that's okay.
So what's number 3 on our list of do's when storytelling?
I guess part of that, what I just said, is be real, be yourself, be authentic. And where you're comfortable to do so, make it personal. People like to hear about other people's stories. They like to see other people's journeys. It helps them in many different ways, whether it's validating themselves, whether it's going, you know, I'm not alone in the world, it's okay.
Number 4 is be credible. Don't make it up. You can share other people's stories, or, you know, stories that you've heard in the news or that maybe you've read in a novel or something, but then acknowledge that that is not your story. Don't take on others as your own, because then you lose credibility. But be credible. So it's like, you know, I read an amazing article last night and I want to share it with you. I nearly did a don't as well.
It's so easy for us to go to don'ts.
Oh,
it's human nature.
Gosh. Yes. But be credible in what you are saying. And, you know, when you're looking at maybe it's implementing a new system or there's a change to a process or something, and you know that there might be a bit of resistance, go out and research, get a little bit more information that gives the credibility to what you're putting forward, some weight behind it.
Number 5 we have here is, it's okay to display the struggle between expectation and reality. Let people understand that your hard choices, or it's a personal struggle. It could be that this change that you're going to make, you acknowledge that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for yourself. So we're all in this journey together. And the more that you can bring people into the fold, into, okay, we're in this together. How do we do it together? How do we accept the change? Let's share stories maybe, because most people have had to live through some sort of change. Interesting, it just reminded me on the leadership program that we've been running for a client, one of the things that we do right up front, it's actually pre-work, is ask people to share a story about a change they've made. And then we bring it into into day 1 of the workshop, and we get people to have conversations together about why they helped someone make a change and share that story. And that was to help them start setting the scene and to get their juices flowing, I guess, around the art of storytelling in leadership. When we want things to be different, that is why we do that. So we ask them from a personal perspective what made them change, because we generally find it easier to talk about ourselves. And then the second day, we actually ask them to tell a story about a change they helped someone else make. So in 2 cases here, we use storytelling as part of the leadership program.
And for a good story, start in the middle. So we've mentioned this earlier up is, share the drama and then you can go to the backstory and the learnings and share what went wrong and then what do we learn from it and how do we go forward. I think for those of us, because I can be one of them, who like to be a little bit long-winded with our tales, is really kind of like thinking about that. Start with the drama and then give a little bit of the back history rather than giving this whole long back history. But by the time you've got to the drama, everyone's looking at you going, what is your point here?
Yeah, that would have been when I stepped in with my personality type and go, just get to the point now, please. So I think we've got keep it simple. Less is more. People remember the heart of the story long before they fall asleep. So get to the point. If you think of a good movie you've seen, sometimes, if it's too convoluted, you lose it. Yeah. You just lose interest.
And then the final one, which I love, is your story is your gift to others.
That's nice.
It's a gift that they get to open because they get to know a little bit more about you. It gets to help them create a better world themselves or do things in a different way. And always remember that sharing stories is a gift to everyone who's around you.
So how do you know you are having an impact? Get others to start sharing stories. If you start hearing other people sharing stories, you see a different way, changed ways of working or behaviours in the work site. There's less conversational waste. So by storytelling, you get buy-in from people. Then hopefully the next time you go around and you want to change, the change may not take so long and you can maybe get to the point a bit quicker because we now have some emotional connection from our storytelling efforts.
And also you'll find people telling stories in places maybe they didn't before. So maybe it's at the smoke shack, where it used to just be like brash and bravado conversation, but you start overhearing stories around, where people are helping each other learn. You can find it in really interesting ways. And ask yourself, do you have a good story that can help others have a safer day? And you want to share it, but you don't know how. So that's what we're here for. Reach out to us at hello@safetycollaborations.com and let's start sharing stories and changing lives.
Thank you for joining us today. Always lovely to have conversations that matter. So do connect with us on our website, safetycollaborations.com. We do have a live chat, so ask us questions on that. We'd love to get some questions coming towards us. We're now getting close to our 50th episode, which is pretty exciting. So give us some questions. How can we help you? Or you've got something you'd like us to chat about or research for you, use the chat, let us know, or reach out to us on our LinkedIn pages. Help us spread the word by following us on your favourite podcast platform. Maybe even give us a bit of a thumbs up review. 5-star would be awesome, but whatever you think it is, and share it with others. The more it grows, the more that we can help other people. So till next week, stay safe and stay well.